for this G20 finance ministers and also central bank governors meetings?
For the past few years, we've made tremendous progress on tax in the G20. We have fought tax opacity by promoting exchange of information. Then we moved to fighting tax avoidance by multinationals. That's the BEPS work, base erosion and profit shifting. These were the two tax pillars of the G20. And now, with this G20 Tax Policy Symposium, we're starting the third tax pillar of the G20 work, which is about incorporating tax policy issues, including domestic tax policy issues, in the structural reforms which are needed and promoted by the G20. And the Tax Policy Symposium identified two main themes. One about how to make sure that we have inclusive growth and how can tax policy support these. And on the other hand, how to promote tax certainty to strengthen investment and trade.
So it's not only about internal tax policy, but also external between countries.
Countries are sovereign from a tax perspective. Jurisdictions too, like Hong Kong and the special administrative region of China. But they have spillovers and they have interaction. And you cannot design in a globalized environment a tax policy on your own because you have no longer any border from a tax perspective. So the domestic dimension is very much implicated with the international tax dimension. And that's why in the G20 we are promoting the international tax agenda. But now we are incorporating some domestic perspective, like how to design a tax system which would facilitate inclusive growth or which would facilitate tax
That's
certainty.
where my second question comes to. So there are lots of differences between countries in terms of tax policy. So how does OECD to coordinate between countries on this matter?
We need cooperation, as you've just said. That's a key word. We need to move away from tax competition to tax cooperation to allow the countries to decide on their tax system. So we very much are favorable to tax sovereignty. But within your tax sovereignty, when you cooperate with the others, you also need to design your tax policy in a way which is the most conducive to growth, to reducing inequalities, and to attracting investment without moving to tax competition. And that's this difficult and delicate balance that we need to reach with good tax policy analysis by the G20, identifying the best practices, and trying to provide common responses to common challenges like the taxation of the digitization of the economy.
America once implemented tax reduction to boost economy, and what's your suggestion or comments on how countries or OECD to deal with economic crisis in terms of tax reduction?
Tax reduction may be a reduction of the tax rate for corporate income tax, and that's what the US wants to do, but the US has not been able to do, and we'll see probably after the presidential election in the United States some tax policy reform, which would reduce the marginal corporate income tax rate from 40%, which is the highest at the OECD, to something like 25 to 30%. So reducing the rate of corporate income tax for the countries which are very high rate is probably a necessity. But we need to go beyond this issue of rates, but also the tax policy mix. How much of VAT, indirect taxation, do you have? How much of personal tax you have on capital income? How much of property tax you have? Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Singapore, the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, made very good point on the taxation of immovable property, which can be progressive, on the taxation of the transaction on real estate property, which can reduce speculation, which can also reduce inequalities and be more inclusive. So there is a wide policy mix, and that's why the symposium yesterday was a way to identify the issues. We will now start working with these issues with the support of the IMF, and we'll be able to get back to the G20 with some more analysis and some best practices on the way forward.
Minister Lau Chiwei also mentioned the reform of China's tax policy. We have some challenges, such as from the interest group. To your comment, do you have any comments on this?
Minister Lajiwe made very good point yesterday in his opening remarks, but also interacting with the room. He mentioned the reform of the VAT, which is quite fundamental in this country, to adapt the Chinese economy to modernity and to financial services and other forms of services, and there are many challenges there. He also mentioned the issue of environmental taxes, the issue of personal income taxes, and how to make sure that you can fight vested interest, make progress, and have a more inclusive tax system. So the advice first is that the tax reform on VAT is a very good reform. Now there are some challenges in implementation, and we are working with the tax authorities to see how we can improve the situation. And for the rest, environmental taxes, property taxes, personal income taxes, we are starting working with Chinese authorities to see how we can bring our advice and how we can find a solution which will increase inclusivity, which is a key aspect, while still promoting growth. With the new normal, you still have very good growth, and we need, China needs to have an adapted tax system.
You're from Paris.
The OECD is based in Paris, and I'm French originally. Indeed.
So France is also a member country of EU. We understand that EU, all the member countries of EU share the same currency, the euro, but not the same fiscal and tax system. Do you have any comments on this? Is there any challenges on this, or is it better to share the same as well?
The European Union has today 28 member countries, tomorrow probably 27, with the UK leaving the European Union, and they are not all in what we call the Eurozone. So you have a very complex situation there. And what is clear is that for those who are in the Eurozone, they have a common monetary policy, they have some common rules on public deficits, and they have hardly any common rule on taxation. So the issue of harmonizing taxation, in particular corporate income tax within the European Union, is a big one, but this is to be taken by unanimity rule. So if you want to change, you need to have unanimity, and the European Union members so far have been unable to reach a common approach to these challenges, which is why they turn to the OECD, actually, which has a membership broader than the European Union, as we have the US, Australia, Japan, Korea, and many others, to bring common solutions. And that's what we've done in the area of base erosion and profit shifting, fighting the avoidance of companies. We have developed a plan of 15 actions that were all adopted in 2 years' time with all the G20 and all the OECD countries, 90% of the world economy, to provide concrete instruments to governments, including the Chinese government, to fight tax avoidance by neutralizing technical stuff like hybrid mismatches or by changing transfer pricing rules. So this is done. And now the European Union is implementing the agreement reached at the level of the US.
What's your expectation of this meeting? Have you reached your expectation?
We have reached our expectation. I think the tax policy symposium allowed a very useful and constructive discussion, identified a few themes and challenges, and now we have a mandate. The G20 finance ministers have mandated us to work with the IMF to provide concrete solutions to move this agenda forward.